He walks into the theater wearing nothing but a borrowed blazer and a red bandana in his pocket, just a kid from nowhere, standing in front of Hollywood's brightest lights. The crowd expects a performance, but what he does next leaves an entire room of stars and soldiers in complete silence, and what one man, Sylvester Stallone, says in response changes everything. Before we share this powerful moment, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow at 6 p.m. we've got another unforgettable story just for you. He was just a kid, but something in his eyes told you he'd been through more than most grown men. Ethan Carter didn't speak much, not because he couldn't, he just learned early that words rarely fixed anything. At 10 years old, he'd already mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. He lived in a group home nestled at the edge of a small town in Texas where the wind never stopped whispering and the afternoon smelled like sun-warmed earth and old rope swings. The other kids at Maplewood Home for Boys called him Rambo, not to tease but out of respect. Every morning, rain or shine, Ethan tied a red bandana around his forehead, painted 2 black streaks under his eyes using ash from the fireplace, and strapped a bent stick across his back like a combat knife. His shirt was sleeveless, his jeans were shredded, his boots didn't match. And still, when he walked across the gravel yard with his jaw set and shoulders squared, he looked like someone ready to survive the impossible. But Ethan wasn't just playing dress-up. He did it because pretending to be strong was the only thing that made him feel safe. Therefore, he wore that homemade costume every day, no matter what the weather was, no matter who laughed, no matter how many times the staff asked him to change. No one knew exactly how long he'd been doing it. Rumor had it he started the day after his parents died, killed in a head-on collision while returning from a family camping trip when Ethan was just 7. He'd survived the crash without a scratch. His father hadn't made it out of the driver's seat. His mother died in the hospital 2 hours later, still calling for him. He hadn't cried since. That same week, someone at the hospital gave Ethan a small portable DVD player and a handful of old movies to keep him company while social services figured out where to place him. One of those movies was First Blood, and something in it clicked. Ethan didn't say it out loud, but he watched that film on repeat over and over until the disc started skipping. The way Rambo moved through forests alone. The way he stayed silent, precise, controlled. The way he endured things no one should endure and still kept standing. Rambo didn't cry, he didn't beg, he didn't fall apart, he survived. Ethan decided that was who he needed to become. Maplewood wasn't a bad place. Miss Caroline, the head of the home, tried her best. She kept the fridge stocked, made sure the bedrooms were clean, and always said goodnight to each boy individually, even if they pretended to be asleep. But there were too many children and not enough staff. Birthdays went unnoticed, personal stories got lost. No one had time to dig through emotional debris when there were mouths to feed and math homework to check. Still, Ethan stood out. Not because he wanted to, but because it was impossible not to notice a 10-year-old walking through a grocery store dressed like a Vietnam War veteran. The town was used to him. At first, people stared. Then they nodded. Then they looked away. But one person didn't. Therefore, everything changed. Toby Nguyen was a year older than Ethan. He arrived at Maplewood after his parents were deported. Unlike Ethan, Toby talked too much, laughed too loud, and carried around an old camcorder that barely worked. He filmed everything, ants fighting over a skittle, the way clouds moved, the way Ethan did push-ups in the yard every morning like clockwork. "You look cool," Toby says, pressing record. Ethan didn't respond, just did another push-up. Like, if someone messed with you, I feel like you'd bite their neck or something. Still nothing. Toby paused the camera. "You ever think about being famous?" That made Ethan stop. He sat up, sweat dripping off his forehead. Famous people get looked at. So? I don't want to be looked at. I want to be seen. Toby didn't get it at the time, but he would. Weeks passed. Fall came. The Texas sun backed off a little, but the afternoon still felt like you were breathing through a curtain of heat. Ethan kept his routine. Up at 6, 50 push-ups, strap on the costume, silent breakfast. Rambo-style patrol around the perimeter. Every Sunday, Toby would edit together clips he filmed during the week on the foster home's ancient laptop. One of those Sundays, on a whim, he uploaded a short video to YouTube titled, Real-Life Rambo Kid. It was just under 2 minutes. The first 15 seconds showed Ethan standing motionless on a stump, wind blowing the red bandana. Then a cut to him sprinting through the woods, ducking under branches, jumping over logs. Then a shot of him walking down the hallway of the house like he was entering a battlefield. Final frame, Ethan looking directly into the camera, silent, still, eyes like stone. It got 3 views in the first hour. Then someone commented, "This kid's got something. Feels like a movie." Toby didn't think much of it. He certainly didn't expect what would happen next. By Monday, the video had 1,400 views. By Wednesday, over 200,000. By Friday, Good Morning America producers were calling the foster home. But Miss Caroline didn't let them speak to Ethan. Therefore, curiosity only grew. A week later, an envelope arrived. Not just any envelope, thick, textured, embossed with gold lettering. It came from Beverly Hills. Inside, it was a short letter, handwritten, and at the bottom, a name, Sylvester Stallone. The staff didn't believe it but the signature was real, verified. The letter was brief but unmistakably personal. To the real Rambo, you remind me what strength truly looks like. It's not about how much you can lift, it's about how much you can carry, quietly, and still stand tall. Keep going. Sly. There was something else in the box. Wrapped in navy blue tissue paper, folded carefully, a bandana. Not just any bandana. The original one. From First Blood. The real one. Toby cried when he saw it. Miss Caroline gasped. Ethan, he didn't say a word. He just put it on, tied it slowly, precisely. Then he walked outside, stood on the same stump as in Toby's video, and looked toward the trees. Something in his chest shifted. He wasn't pretending anymore. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because what Stallone had done, what the world had now seen, was about to pull Ethan into something far bigger than he ever imagined. Ethan kept the bandana. He didn't show it off, didn't frame it, didn't even let the other kids touch it. He just wore it, like always. But it wasn't the same, because now, when he stepped outside, people looked, not stared, looked, with recognition, with emotion, with hope. And Ethan didn't know what to do with that. Toby, on the other hand, was riding high. Dude, you're famous. Do you even realize Stallone watches your videos now? Ethan barely looked up from tying his bootlaces. Doesn't mean anything. Toby frowned. Doesn't mean anything? He called you the real Rambo? Ethan shrugged. I don't even know what that means. He stood up, brushing dust off his knees. I didn't ask for this. Toby's smile faded. No, but maybe you need it. Miss Caroline started getting calls. From everywhere. Local TV, national news, podcasts, charities, veteran groups, even Hollywood. They all wanted a piece of Ethan. They wanted interviews, photos, appearances. They wanted the boy behind the bandana. But Ethan wasn't ready for any of that. He couldn't explain why, not really. But in his mind, taking off the mystery meant taking off the armor, and the armor was all he had left. That night, Miss Caroline sat with him on the porch swing. The summer air was thick, filled with the sound of cicadas and the distant thrum of an approaching storm. You know, she said gently, sometimes the world doesn't just see us. It needs us. Ethan stayed quiet. She looked at him. What you've been through, it matters. You don't have to tell it, but you also don't have to hide behind someone else's story forever. Ethan turned toward her slowly. Rambo doesn't cry. Miss Caroline didn't flinch. No, but John did. That hit somewhere deep. The next morning, an envelope arrived, bigger than the last. This one wasn't from Stallone. It was from a major film studio. Inside, an invitation. We would be honored to fly Ethan Carter to Los Angeles for a special tribute event, 40 years of Rambo, live at the Dolby Theater. There were tickets, plane reservations, even a handwritten post-it from a producer. Stallone wants to meet him, in person. The house exploded with excitement. Toby ran around yelling, "You're going to Hollywood, baby?" The staff couldn't believe it. Even some of the boys, usually hardened by jealousy, clapped Ethan on the back. But Ethan didn't smile. Therefore, when Miss Caroline asked him what was wrong, he finally said it. "I don't want people to see me without the costume." She blinked. "Why?" Ethan looked away, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I'm just me." The silence that followed was long and gentle. Miss Caroline didn't rush him. She just waited. And eventually Ethan spoke again. "When my parents died, I didn't feel anything. Not sadness, not anger. Just emptiness. Like the part of me that was real was gone too." He looked down at his hands. Rambo filled that space. "When I wear this, people see a fighter. Not a kid who couldn't save his mom, not a boy who screams in his sleep, not a nobody. If I take this off, I'm afraid I'll disappear again." She placed her hand over his, firm, warm. "You never disappeared, Ethan. You just got quiet." A breeze blew across the porch. Leaves rustled. The house creaked. "You don't have to go," she said. "But if you do, maybe it's time the world meets the boy behind the bandana." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the crash. The scream. The silence. The moment when the nurse said, "You're a brave boy." He hadn't felt brave. He felt broken. He remembered the first time he tied a strip of red cloth around his forehead. It was from his dad's old flannel. He didn't know why he did it. It just felt right. He remembered looking in the mirror and seeing someone else, someone who could survive. But now? Now, the world wanted him to be both. And he wasn't sure he could do it. 3 days later, the house van buzzed up to the airport drop-off zone. Ethan stepped out slowly, no Rambo gear, just jeans, a plain t-shirt, and the original bandana folded carefully in his pocket. His hands were shaking. Toby beside him was recording on his camcorder. "This is so cool. Dude, you're going to be on stage with Stallone. He's going to give you a fist bump, maybe even cry. Old guys cry when they meet legends." Ethan managed a small smile, but inside he felt like he was walking into a war zone unarmed. The plane lifted. The world below shrank. Ethan sat by the window, fingers pressed to the glass. This wasn't just a trip, it was a test of who he was without the costume, of what it meant to be seen. And somewhere over Arizona, as the clouds turned orange with sunset, Ethan pulled out the bandana and held it in his lap. He didn't tie it. Not yet. The Dolby Theater was bigger than anything Ethan had ever seen. The red carpet, the flashing lights, the velvet ropes, reporters shouting names he didn't recognize, cameras swiveling like hawks. He'd seen this kind of thing on television, on the tiny scratched screen back at the group home. But standing in the middle of it, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a trap. And Ethan couldn't stop sweating. Toby was practically glowing, his eyes darting between celebrities, production crew, and event banners with 40 years of Rambo printed in bold metallic letters. "Dude, we're breathing the same air as Harrison Ford," he whispered. Ethan barely heard him. His heart was thumping too loud. He clutched the folded bandana in his pocket like a lifeline. His fingers had gone cold. He hadn't worn it since stepping off the plane. He thought maybe he could do this as Ethan, just Ethan. But every step toward the entrance made him wonder if he'd made a mistake. Inside, the theater buzzed with energy. Old action stars lined the front rows. Veterans from all branches of the military filled seats in full uniform, and giant screens played a montage of Rambo scenes, slow-motion explosions, jungle camo, the iconic scream from First Blood Part 2. Stallone hadn't arrived yet. Ethan was seated near the front, dressed in a borrowed blazer and slacks. He felt like a mannequin, tight collar, stiff shoes, the unfamiliar itch of fabric that didn't belong to him. Every time someone glanced at him, he wondered if they saw him, or just the story about him. The ceremony began. Applause erupted. Famous directors gave tributes. Actors reenacted lines. There were standing ovations, dramatic music cues, and heartfelt speeches from military personnel who'd drawn strength from Rambo during deployments. Then the host stepped to the mic. "And now," she said, "we invite someone very special to the stage, a young man whose story reminded us what resilience really looks like. He didn't grow up on film sets. He grew up surviving real battles, emotional ones. He didn't play a hero. He became one." She turned toward the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan Carter." Spotlights exploded. Applause rose like a tidal wave. Cameras zoomed in. Ethan's legs wouldn't move. Miss Carolyn leaned over. "Go ahead, baby." Toby gave him a thumbs up, eyes wide. But Ethan was frozen. Therefore, the host paused. The audience leaned forward. The clapping faded into awkward silence. Ethan's fingers found the bandana in his pocket. He gripped it hard. His throat tightened. His chest burned. Everything in him screamed, "Don't go up there, not like this. Not without the costume, not without the shield." He stood, slowly, and he walked. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each step up the side stairs felt like walking into enemy fire. When he reached the stage, the host smiled and stepped aside. He stood alone in the spotlight. No Rambo, no war paint, no armor. Just a 10-year-old boy with the weight of millions watching. They waited for him to speak, but he didn't. He just stared out. Into the rows of faces, into the cameras, into the brightness. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the red bandana, unfolded it slowly. He looked at it. And then he let it fall, right there on the stage floor. Gasps rippled through the audience. Toby sat up straight. Miss Caroline covered her mouth. The host took a step forward, but stopped. Ethan looked down at the cloth, then looked up again, and finally he spoke. "My name is Ethan Carter." His voice echoed through the theater, small but unwavering. "I used to wear this because I thought it made me strong." A pause. "Because I didn't want anyone to see I was hurting." The room was still. "I thought if I looked like someone who couldn't be broken, I wouldn't feel broken." He took a deep breath. "But the truth is, I was scared. I am scared." Another pause. "But I think maybe being brave isn't pretending to be someone else." He looked straight into the front row. "Maybe being brave is being exactly who you are, even when it hurts." Silence. No one moved. Then someone stood up. Sylvester Stallone, dressed in black, arms folded, eyes glassy. He walked toward the stage without a word, climbed the steps, stopped beside Ethan, and said quietly, into the mic, but only to him, "You got it, kid." Then he turned to the crowd. "Now that's strength." The place erupted. Thunderous applause, cheering, people wiping their eyes, veterans saluting. Cameras flashed. But Ethan wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the bandana on the floor. And for the first time since the crash, he felt light. Afterward, backstage, Stallone gave him a hug. Not for the cameras, just for him. "You don't need the costume anymore," he whispered. "You're the real thing." Ethan didn't say anything. He just closed his eyes and nodded. But the night wasn't over. Back at the hotel, Ethan stood by the window, looking out over Los Angeles. Lights, cars, stars above the haze. Toby tossed a pillow at him. "Dude, you killed it. People were crying." Ethan didn't smile. Not fully. But something had shifted. Then a knock on the door. Miss Caroline opened it. It was a producer from the studio. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "We just wanted to let Ethan know—" Pause. "He's being offered a role if he wants it." Ethan didn't say yes right away. The offer sat in his lap like a stone. Toby was practically levitating beside him. "Bro, you're gonna be in a movie, like actual Rambo vibes, but real? What are you even thinking about?" Ethan ran his fingers along the edge of the envelope the studio had given him. Inside, a script, a contract, and a personal letter from the director saying they'd write the part however he wanted. But Ethan wasn't sure if he wanted to play a part anymore. Therefore, he did something no one expected. He asked to go home. Back at Maplewood, the Texas sun hadn't changed. The air still buzzed with cicadas. The gravel still crunched underfoot. And the house, painted in faded blue, still leaned slightly to the left, like it was listening to the wind. But something had changed. Ethan walked up the driveway, blazer gone, red bandana tie. Not across his forehead, but around his wrist. A reminder, not an identity. Miss Caroline opened the door before he could knock. She didn't say anything. She just held him. And this time, for the first time since the accident, Ethan let the tears come. A week passed, then another. Hollywood waited. The studio followed up twice. Still, Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he spent his days helping Miss Caroline fix the chicken coop, tutoring the younger boys with their reading, and once a week, running laps around the field with Toby, who now filmed everything with a proper camera donated by the studio. And every now and then, someone from town would recognize him. "You're the Rambo kid, right?" He'd smile, nod, say thanks. But inside, he didn't feel like the Rambo kid anymore. He felt like Ethan. One morning, a thick manila envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, a worn leather-bound notebook and a short note in messy, slanted handwriting. "I don't usually keep journals, but I started one after First Blood. Thought maybe it was time someone else wrote the ending. You've got a better story anyway. S." The notebook had Stallone's initials carved into the corner. Its pages were blank, except for the first, which read, "What does strength mean to you?" Ethan stared at the page for a long time. Then, for the first time in his life, he started to write. Months passed. The story faded from headlines, but not from hearts. Ethan didn't go to Hollywood. He didn't sign the contract. Instead, he made a choice that surprised everyone. He asked Miss Caroline if he could stay at Maplewood permanently, not just as a foster kid, but as a junior counselor. "I want to help the others," he said, "the ones who still need the armor." And she said yes. Years later, the local news did a follow-up story. Rambo Kid turns mentor, from viral star to everyday hero. The segment showed Ethan, now taller, more confident, teaching self-defense classes to foster youth, leading storytelling circles, and helping others find their voice the way he once struggled to find his. They asked him if he ever regretted turning down Hollywood. He just smiled. "I didn't turn it down," he said. "I chose something else." On the 5th anniversary of that night at the Dolby Theater, a small package arrived, no return address. Inside, a single frame photo. Ethan standing on the stage, Stallone beside him, the red bandana on the floor between them, and underneath, handwritten in silver ink, "You didn't need the costume then. You don't need it now. But I kept mine." Sly. Ethan hung the frame in the Maplewood hallway above the front door. Every kid who entered saw it. Not because it was about fame, but because it was about being seen. That night, Ethan stood outside, hands in his pockets, eyes toward the horizon. Toby stepped beside him. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd said yes?" Ethan thought about it. Then he shook his head. "I think I'd still be trying to prove something. He looked at the field where the younger boys were playing. Now I don't have to. Toby nudged him. You still got the bandana? Ethan pulled it from his pocket, held it up, then smiled. Some things you don't wear anymore, but you don't throw them away either. He was just a kid. But something in his eyes told you he'd been through more than most grown men, and now he was the kind of man who didn't need to be Rambo, because he'd become something even rarer, someone who knew who he was, even without the armor. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. You know, life's not about the spotlight or the applause. It's about heart. And if this story meant something to you, just know it meant a lot to me too. Keep fighting. Keep believing. And above all, never forget who you are, with or without the bandana. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next one.